The mining colony of Veyran was always loud with the noise of machines, but deep under the metallic towers, silence lived in the prison cells. The human trader named Daniel walked through the cold halls, guided by two guards who laughed and spat on the ground. They wanted him to see what they called their craziest treasure. At the end of the hall, he saw her. A figure sat against the wall, thin arms bound in heavy chains. A rough sack covered her head, her body trembling as if she had not eaten for days. The guards threw scraps near her feet and joked loudly. "Don't listen to her, she's insane. She talks nonsense about rulers and dead husbands. Better to let her rot." Daniel felt his stomach twist. He had seen many prisoners on many worlds, but this was different. Something about the small movement of her hands, the weak sound of her breath made him pause. Her suffering was not madness, it was cruelty. The sack moved slightly as the widow raised her head. A muffled whisper slipped out, words almost lost in the cold air. "Please." "Water." Her voice was cracked and faint. Daniel's heart jolted. She was not screaming, not ranting like a madwoman. She was begging like a dying soul. The guards laughed again. "Ignore her, traitor. She will try to trick you with sad stories. She is dangerous in her own way. Best to leave her in the dark." They pushed Daniel forward, but his eyes stayed on her, chained and broken. He asked quietly, "What did she do?" One guard shrugged. "Her husband was once a leader here. He stood against the council. He died. Now she claims we killed him. She tells lies, so we put her here. Safer for everyone," the second guard sneered. "Besides, she keeps talking about some secret evidence. She says she has proof of their crimes, crazy talk. Who believes a widow who can't even stand?" Daniel frowned. The words of the guards did not match the sight before him. This was no wild-eyed criminal. This was a starving woman, a widow locked away to be forgotten. His chest felt heavy. A voice inside him whispered that something was deeply wrong. The guards finally left him alone to check the goods he had come for. But Daniel's steps slowed as he passed her cell again. The widow had fallen to the side, her breathing shallow. He could see her thin fingers shaking against the chains. He looked left and right, making sure no one watched. Slowly, he bent down and placed a small flask of water near her. With trembling effort, she reached out blindly, the sack still covering her face. Her hands touched the flask and she drank desperately. The sound of her swallowing sharp in the silence. When she finished, she whispered again, "You are not like them, are you human?" Daniel hesitated. His instincts told him to leave, to stay out of this. But something stronger pulled him closer. He whispered back, "Yes, I am." "Who are you?" Her voice broke as she spoke. "They call me mad, but I am not. They killed my husband, he was their voice of justice. Now they want me silent too. They will let me starve here. But I know their secrets?" Her words struck him like cold fire. A woman chained, starved, hidden away. Not because of madness, but because she knew too much. Daniel's hand shook slightly as he touched the rough sack on her head. He wanted to pull it away, to see her face, but fear of the guards stopped him. The widow whispered again, a sound both weak and strong. "Please believe me, if you leave me here. Their lies will win. If you help me, I can show you the truth." Footsteps echoed at the far end of the hall. The guards were returning. Daniel stepped back quickly. His heart pounding, the widow sat still, chains heavy on her arms as if she had never spoken. The guards came back with smug grins. "Seen enough, traitor?" one asked. Daniel nodded slowly, hiding the storm in his chest. He had seen more than enough. The image of her trembling hands and her broken voice would not leave his mind. As they led him out of the prison, Daniel felt his jaw tighten. This was no insane widow. This was a prisoner of truth, and if what she said was real, then the entire colony lived under a lie. That night, as Daniel lay in his small rented quarters, the sound of her whisper echoed in his ears. "Please, believe me." He knew sleep would not come. The choice was clear. Walk away and forget her, or risk everything to uncover what she knew. And deep down, Daniel already knew which path he would take. The night on Veyran colony was colder than Daniel expected. The air carried the taste of metal dust, and the silence outside the prison walls was almost painful. He could not rest. The widow's trembling voice kept echoing in his mind. Her words, her plea, her broken strength, they dug into his chest like a blade. He rose from his narrow bed and paced the floor. His thoughts battled within. He was only a traitor, a visitor passing through. He had no reason to involve himself in the politics of this cursed colony. But his heart refused to be silent. He saw her chained body every time he closed his eyes. He heard her whisper, "Please believe me." Finally, when the streets grew quiet and most guards were gone from their posts, Daniel made his choice. He wrapped his cloak tight around him and slipped into the night. His boots crunched against the dust as he moved toward the prison. The outer gates were guarded, but Daniel knew traitors had certain privileges. He had learned to bribe, to smile, to slip coins into waiting hands. The guards at the first post took his money and laughed. "Back for another look at the crazy one, be careful. She might tell you she's the queen of the stars next time." Daniel forced a weak smile. "Curiosity," he said. They let him pass, never suspecting his real intent inside. The prison hall was quieter than before. Only one sleepy guard sat at a desk. Daniel offered him a flask of spiced drink from his satchel. Within minutes, the man's head slumped forward on the table. Snoring heavily, Daniel's heartbeat quickened as he walked deeper. His steps echoed in the stone hall. The same cell awaited him at the far corner. The woman was still there, chained, unmoving. For a moment he feared she was dead, but then her fingers twitched, weak and slow. He knelt near the bars and whispered, "It's me, the traitor. I brought you water earlier." The sack on her head shifted slightly. A dry whisper answered. "You came back." Daniel pulled out a piece of bread from his cloak. He pushed it through the bars. The widow's hands fumbled but managed to take it. She ate with desperate hunger, crumbs falling to the floor. When she finished, she leaned against the wall, breath heavy. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why help me?" Daniel hesitated, his voice came low. "Because I think you're telling the truth. And because no one deserves this," a faint sound, almost like a broken laugh, escaped her lips. "You are the first to say that. They all call me mad. They all say I lost my mind when my husband died, but I did not. They fear me because I know." Daniel leaned closer. "Know what?" Her head tilted under the sack. "The council killed him, my husband, Jarek. He was a voice of justice. He exposed their theft, their crimes, their lies. They made him disappear. Then they chained me here so no one would believe my words. They said I was mad, a widow blinded by grief, but I know where his records are hidden. I know the proof. The truth they fear." Daniel's skin prickled. He could feel the weight of her words pressing against the air. If she truly had evidence, then everything in this colony was a lie built on blood, he whispered. "Why haven't you told anyone where this proof is?" Her voice trembled. "Because no one listens. They laugh, they call me crazy. And if I tell the wrong person, the council will destroy it before the truth can spread. I need someone who believes, someone who will not betray me." Her hands reached blindly toward him. Chains rattled as she stretched them out. Daniel hesitated only a moment before taking her thin, shaking fingers in his. The touch felt fragile, but within it burned a strange fire. "Then tell me," Daniel said firmly. "Where is it?" The widow's breath caught. She leaned closer, whispering through the sack. "In the old mine, Sector 12. Beneath the collapsed shaft, Jarek hid a box. It holds everything, names, dates, proof of murder and theft. It will end them if revealed." Daniel's pulse raced. The old mines were abandoned and dangerous. Few dared to go there. It was the perfect place to hide something important. Suddenly, the sound of heavy boots echoed in the hall. The widow froze, pulling her hands back quickly. Daniel straightened. His heart pounded as two guards appeared at the far end. Their torches flickered against the walls. One of them grunted. "Traitor, what are you doing here at this hour?" Daniel forced a calm smile. "Couldn't sleep, thought I'd see your famous prisoner again." "Wanted to see if the stories were true?" The guard smirked. "She's still breathing, shame. She was supposed to be gone days ago. Council doesn't like wasting food on liars." They shoved past him and kicked at the bars. The widow flinched but stayed silent. One guard laughed. "Still mad, still quiet, good. Less noise for us," they spat and walked away. When their footsteps faded, Daniel leaned close again. His voice urgent. "I will come back. I will not let them kill you," the widow whispered through the sack. Her words like a blade of hope. "Then hurry. Time is short." Daniel's chest burned with determination. He had walked into this cell only as a traitor, but now he walked out carrying a secret heavy enough to shake the colony. The whispers of the widow had become his mission, and he knew the shadows would not rest until the truth was free. The next day, the colony looked as normal as ever. The mines roared with machines, traders shouted in the markets, and guards patrolled the streets with their usual arrogance. To anyone watching, nothing seemed wrong. But inside Daniel's chest, fire burned. He now carried a secret that could destroy the council. He kept replaying the widow's words in his mind. Sector 12, the collapsed shaft, a box hidden beneath the stones. Every detail pressed against his thoughts. He knew it was dangerous, but the truth demanded action that evening. Daniel returned to the prison again. He waited until the night shift grew lazy, until shadows swallowed the corners of the hall. Then he moved quickly to her cell. The widow lifted her head as he approached, the sack on her face tilted toward him, as if she could see him through the cloth. "You came back," she whispered. Her voice was faint but steadier than before. "Yes," Daniel said softly. "Tell me more, I need to understand. If I am to risk my life for you, I must know everything." She leaned closer to the bars. "My husband Jarek was not only a leader, he was respected by both human and alien workers. He wanted fairness, he wanted peace, but the council wanted power and wealth. They stole resources from the miners. They sold lives like property. And when Jarek refused to bow, they silenced him." Daniel's jaw tightened. "How did they kill him?" "They said it was an accident in the mine," she answered, her voice shook with grief. "But I saw his body, the marks of blades." "Not stones. They murdered him. Then they called me mad when I spoke the truth." Daniel felt anger rise in him. The cruelty of the council was worse than he imagined. But there was something else in her tone, a strength that had survived chains and hunger. He realized she was far more dangerous to them alive than dead. Her truth was a weapon, and that was why they covered her face and starved her. "Tell me about the box," Daniel said carefully. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Jarek knew his life was in danger before he died. He hid records. He had copies of council orders, names of bribes, even recordings of their secret meetings. He placed them in a metal box and buried it in Sector 12. He told me before he was taken. I am the only one who knows where." Daniel's heart raced. Evidence like that could crush the council completely. But it was also a death sentence if anyone found out he sought it. "Why me?" he asked. "Why trust a stranger?" The widow's answer came with calm certainty. "Because you gave me water when no one else would. Because you listened when all others called me mad. That is enough for me." Her words pierced Daniel's chest. He realized that trust was all she had left, and now her fate rested in his hands. He reached through the bars and gently touched the chains around her wrists. They were cutting into her skin. "I will find the box," he promised, "and I will bring it back to you. But you must hold on." Her head bowed slightly. "I will endure. As long as I know someone believes for a moment." Silence filled the cell. Only the sound of her shallow breaths echoed. But then footsteps thundered in the hall. Daniel quickly stepped back. 2 guards entered, their faces rough with suspicion. One of them glared. "Still here, traitor." "Do you enjoy talking to corpses?" Daniel forced a laugh. "I was curious, that's all. Wanted to hear her madness myself." "Makes good stories for the road," the guard snorted. "She'll be gone soon, don't waste your time. She'll starve before the week is over." They shoved him away from the bars, not noticing the silent promise that had already been made. When Daniel left the prison, his steps felt heavier. He had a mission now. The widow's whispers were no longer just words, they were chains binding him to the truth. That night, Daniel prepared supplies. A small lamp, rope, tools for digging, and a weapon for defense. The old mine was dangerous, but he had faced worse. He told himself that if he failed, the widow would die unseen, forgotten, and the council would tighten their grip forever. As he packed, he thought of her voice, steady even in weakness. Her strength was not madness, it was courage, and he knew her secret was worth any risk before dawn. Daniel slipped out of the colony and headed toward the wastelands. The air grew colder as he walked, the ground turned jagged, broken from years of mining. In the distance, the collapsed shaft of Sector 12 loomed like a scar in the earth. He stopped at the edge, staring down into the darkness, his breath caught. Somewhere below lay the box, the proof, the truth the council feared, and somewhere behind him, in the prison cell, the widow waited, chains heavy on her arms, hope burning quietly in her heart. Daniel clenched his fists. This was no longer just her secret, it was his fight too. He stepped into the shadows of the mine, knowing there was no turning back. The old mine of Sector 12 was a graveyard of broken machines and rusting metal. Daniel moved carefully, each step echoing in the hollow darkness. His lamp flickered, throwing weak light over jagged rocks and collapsed beams. Dust filled the air, choking and heavy. He remembered the widow's words. Beneath the collapsed shaft, he gripped the rope tied around his waist and lowered himself deeper. His hands scraped against stone, his heart thudding with every sound. The silence of the mine felt alive, as if it was watching him. At last he reached the bottom of the shaft. Broken supports jutted like bones, and the ground was covered with rubble. He set the lamp down and began to dig. His hands bled against the sharp stones. But he did not stop. Sweat dripped down his brow. Dust coated his throat. Hours seemed to pass, until finally his fingers hit something hard. He pulled at the rubble and uncovered a metal edge. A box, old but unbroken. His breath caught as he lifted it from the dirt. The lock was simple, rusted. He forced it open with his knife. Inside lay stacks of papers, data drives, and small recording devices. Daniel's eyes widened. Names, numbers, contracts. The council's crimes spilled out in every page. Proof of theft, proof of murder, proof of betrayal. The widow had spoken the truth. This was enough to burn the council to the ground. But a sound cut through the silence. A faint clatter of stone above. Daniel froze. Shadows moved at the mouth of the shaft. Torches flickered, voices rang out. Search the mine. He's down there. His blood ran cold, the council had learned. Somehow they knew he sought the evidence. Daniel grabbed the box, tied it to his rope, and climbed upward. His muscles screamed with pain. His lamp swung wildly, throwing shaky light on the walls. Shouts grew louder. Boots slammed against the ground above. A guard leaned over the edge, his torchlight falling on Daniel. There. Stop him. Arrows whistled past. One scraped Daniel's shoulder, burning his skin. He gritted his teeth and climbed faster. The box dragged at his side. Heavy with truth at the top, 2 guards rushed him. Daniel swung the box into one man's face, knocking him down. He kicked the other in the knee and dashed toward the tunnels. His breath tore in his chest, his heart thundered. He could not let them take the evidence. The tunnels twisted like veins. Daniel ran through the dark, his lamp dimming behind him. The sound of pursuit echoed, shouts. Footsteps, the clash of weapons. He stumbled, scraped his knees, but pushed on. The exit glowed faintly ahead, moonlight spilling into the tunnel mouth. He sprinted for it, bursting into the cold night air. The wasteland stretched before him. Barren and endless, he had no time to think. He ran, clutching the box to his chest, but the guards poured out after him, torches blazing in the night. Daniel stumbled down a rocky slope, stones crashing under his boots. The wind howled, carrying the sound of pursuit. He could not outrun them forever. He ducked behind a jagged boulder, gasping for breath. The box pressed against his ribs. Inside lay the widow's hope. The truth of her husband's death. Daniel clenched his jaw. If they caught him, all would be lost. Suddenly a hand pulled him from the shadows. Daniel spun, ready to strike, but stopped. A figure stood before him, cloaked in rags, face hidden. "This way," the stranger whispered. "If you want to live." Daniel hesitated, but the sound of guards closing in left him no choice. He followed the stranger through narrow cracks in the rocks. The path twisted, hidden, impossible to see in the dark. The guards' shouts faded behind them, swallowed by the wasteland. At last they stopped in a hollow cave. The stranger lowered his hood, revealing scarred skin and tired eyes. An alien miner, one of the widow's husband's old allies. "I saw you in the prison," the stranger said. "You gave her water, you believe her, don't you?" Daniel nodded, still clutching the box. "She's telling the truth, I have proof now." The miner's eyes burned with fierce light. "Then we must move fast. The council will not rest until you are dead. And she," his voice lowered, "she cannot survive much longer in those chains." Daniel's heart pounded harder. The widow's face flashed in his mind. Her trembling hands, her whispered plea. He realized she had no time left. The council would starve her to death before he could return. He tightened his grip on the box. "Then I'll go back for her. Tonight," the miner shook his head. "You'll never make it alone, the guards will be waiting. But with the truth in your hands, you have a chance, free her. And together you can show the colony what the council has done." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. The path ahead was filled with shadows and danger. But he knew there was no turning back. The widow's hope now rested in his hands. He opened his eyes and looked at the miner. "Then help me, we'll bring her out no matter the cost." The cave was silent except for the sound of Daniel's heavy breathing. He held the box close, its weight pressing into his chest like a promise. The miner, whose name was Kor, crouched by the entrance, his scarred face grim and determined. "She does not have much time," Kor said quietly. "The council will soon grow impatient. They want her gone. The truth you carry makes her more dangerous than ever." Daniel nodded, his fist tightening around the box. "Then we move tonight. I will not let her die in those chains. Kor studied him for a long moment, then gave a sharp nod. I will guide you through the hidden paths. There are tunnels the guards do not know. Once we reach the prison, we must move fast. Do not hesitate. The plan was simple, yet every step carried the risk of death. Still, Daniel felt no fear, only urgency. He thought of the widow, starved and shackled, whispering through the sack that covered her face. Her voice still rang in his ears. Please believe me, by nightfall they moved. The wasteland stretched dark and endless, but Kor knew the secret trails. They passed through narrow cracks in the rocks, slipped under broken walls, and crawled through dry ditches. The moonlight barely touched them at last. The black towers of the prison rose before them. Torches burned along its walls, shadows of guards shifting against the stone. Daniel's heart pounded. He had walked through those halls before as a traitor. Now he returned as a thief of truth. Kor pointed toward a half-collapsed drainage tunnel. This way, he whispered. They crawled through the narrow passage, the stench of rust and rot filling their noses. The tunnel opened into a forgotten corridor, dusty and dark. No guards patrolled here. Step by step, they crept forward. The widow's cell was near. Daniel's chest grew tight. He feared what he might find. Would she still be alive, or would he be too late? When they reached her cell, Daniel froze. The widow lay slumped against the wall, her thin frame motionless for a terrible moment. He thought she was gone. He rushed forward, kneeling beside the bars. It's me, he whispered urgently. Wake up, please. Her head moved slightly, a weak groan escaping from beneath the sack. Relief surged through Daniel. She was still alive, though barely. Kor pulled out tools from his satchel and worked quickly on the lock. The metal creaked but gave way. Daniel slipped inside. His hands trembled as he lifted the widow gently. She was frail, bones sharp under her skin, but her voice still carried strength. You came, she whispered. Her words cracked but filled with something more than despair. Hope. Yes, Daniel said firmly. I have the box. The truth is safe. But now we must get you out. Kor snapped the chains from her wrists and ankles. The widow winced as the iron fell away. Her skin was raw and bruised. Daniel wrapped his arm around her to support her. For the first time since he saw her, she stood weak but unbroken. Her breath was heavy, but she whispered, I will not slow you down. I must walk. I must fight. Yarrick would want this. Daniel looked into the darkness beneath the sack and felt a surge of respect. She was no helpless prisoner. She was a woman of courage, stronger than the chains that had bound her. They moved through the corridor, but a sound stopped them, shouts, boots pounding. The guards had discovered the broken lock. The alarm rang through the prison like thunder. Run, Kor hissed. They sprinted down the tunnel, the widow leaning on Daniel but refusing to fall. Behind them, torches flared. Arrows clattered against the walls. The guards roared, Stop them, the widow must not escape. They burst into the drainage tunnel, crawling fast through the filth. Stones rained down as arrows struck above, but they kept moving. The widow gasped but never cried out. Her strength shone in her silence. At last they tumbled out into the wasteland night. The cold air struck them like knives, but freedom lay ahead. They ran, stumbling, falling, rising again. The widow's chains clattered against the ground where they had fallen like broken promises. The guards poured from the prison, torches blazing. Kor swung his pickaxe to block their path. Daniel pulled the widow forward. His lungs burned, but he refused to stop. The box weighed heavy, but the truth it carried pushed him onward. Finally, they reached the cave once more. Collapsing inside, the widow sank against the wall. Her breath ragged, Daniel knelt beside her, fear flooding him. But she lifted her head and whispered, I am not broken, I will not be broken, I will fight. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Her eyes, though hidden, seemed to pierce through the sack. She was no longer just a widow, no longer just a prisoner. She was a voice of strength, a survivor who carried the courage of the dead. Kor set down his weapon, his chest heaving. We cannot hide long. The council will hunt us, but with the truth in that box and the widow alive, the people may finally see. Daniel placed the box before her, bowing his head. This is yours. The strength to bring justice is yours. The widow touched the box with trembling fingers, and for the first time, Daniel heard her whisper, not with sorrow, but with fire. Then let us show them. Let us show them all. The cave felt like a fragile shelter, a breath of safety between storms. Daniel sat close to the widow, watching her slow but steady breaths. The sack still covered her head, but her voice had changed. It no longer trembled with despair, it carried strength. Kor sharpened his pickaxe in the corner, his scarred face lit by the dim flame of a lantern. The council will not stay quiet. They know the box is gone. They will search every corner of the colony. If they find us, they will kill us all. Daniel nodded, his hand resting on the metal box. Then we must act before they move. We cannot hide forever. The widow shifted, raising her thin hands toward the box. Daniel gently placed it in her lap. Her fingers traced the cold metal. This holds my husband's voice, his fight, his proof. But words alone will not be enough. The people must see, they must hear. They must believe. Daniel leaned closer. Then we bring it to them, not in shadows, but in the open. If the council silences us, they will have to do it in front of everyone. Kor's eyes narrowed. That is dangerous. The council will strike before you speak a single word. The widow straightened her back despite her weakness. Then we give them no choice. We go to the gathering hall tomorrow, where the miners, traders, and workers meet. We show them what the council hides. Daniel felt his heart pound. It was bold, reckless, but it was the only path. The truth had to be seen in the light, not whispered in the dark. That night none of them slept. The widow sat silently, whispering prayers for her husband, for her children lost, for strength that tomorrow would demand. Daniel sharpened his blade and replayed every path in his mind. Kor prepared old escape routes only the miners remembered. When dawn broke, the colony stirred with its usual rhythm, but tension already laced the air. The council had spread guards across the streets. Their eyes scanned the crowd, searching. Everyone knew something had been stolen, but none knew what. Daniel and Kor walked through the market. Cloaks pulled tight. The widow walked between them. Her steps slow but unyielding. People turned their heads to stare. Some whispered in shock, others in fear. Few had seen her outside the prison for years. Is that her? Someone murmured. The mad widow? No, another voice answered. Look at her walk. That is not madness, that is fire. They reached the gathering hall, a great stone chamber where the colony came to settle disputes. Already workers filled the seats, their voices low and restless. The council sat at the front, 6 men in fine robes, their faces pale with anger. One of them stood, pointing. Seize them. They bring lies and poison. Guards rushed forward, but Daniel slammed the box on the stone table. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder. The widow raised her head, her voice breaking through the noise. You call me mad, she said, her tone clear and strong. You chained me, starved me, silenced me. But you could not destroy the truth. The hall fell into silence. Even the guards froze. Her presence commanded attention. Daniel opened the box and pulled out papers, holding them high. These are the records of the council's crimes, proof of theft, proof of betrayal, proof of murder. He placed a recording device on the table, its lights flickering to life. The hall filled with the sound of voices. Council members caught in secret meetings, planning Jarek's death, discussing stolen wealth, mocking the miners they exploited. The words echoed across the chamber. Undeniable gasps rippled through the crowd. Anger flared in the workers' eyes. The council's faces turned pale. One of them shouted, Lies, all lies, this is trickery. But another worker stood, his voice shaking with rage. I was there when Jarek died. I saw the guards drag him away. This proves what we always feared. The hall erupted, shouts and cries filling the air. The council called for order, but their voices were drowned by the people. The widow stepped forward, pulling the sack from her head. Her face was thin, scarred, her eyes hollow from hunger, but they burned with unbroken fire. She raised her voice. They called me mad, but I was never mad. I was witness, I was truth. And now you all see what they tried to bury. The crowd roared with fury. Guards hesitated, unsure whether to strike the widow or to protect themselves from the rising anger of the people. But the council was not finished. The leader rose, his face twisted with rage. He motioned to hidden soldiers. A dozen armored men stormed the hall with weapons drawn. The council would rather drown the truth in blood than lose their grip on power. Daniel drew his blade. Kor raised his pickaxe. The widow stood between them, her voice steady. Then let them come. Let them show the people their true face. The hall shook with chaos as soldiers advanced, but the people were no longer blind. Workers armed with tools rose from their seats, shouting, For Jarek! For freedom! Daniel's heart pounded as the first clash rang out. He knew the fight was only beginning. The truth had been revealed, but now they had to survive it. The gathering hall shook with the roar of voices. Workers and miners surged from their seats, their tools raised high. Soldiers of the council advanced with blades and shields. Sparks of rebellion lit the air like fire. Daniel tightened his grip on his blade. Kor raised his pickaxe, and the widow stood tall between them, her thin body trembling but her eyes blazing with courage. The box of truth lay open on the stone table, its papers scattered like seeds across the hall. The council's lies had been revealed, and now the colony faced its choice. The first clash came like thunder. A soldier swung at Daniel, steel ringing against steel. Daniel parried and shoved him back. Kor struck another guard with his pickaxe, the sound cracking through the air. The workers shouted and joined the fight. Some wielded hammers, others chains, even bare fists. The hall became a storm of chaos. The council shouted from their seats, their faces twisted in fury. "Kill them all, silence the widow. Burn the box." But their words were drowned by the cries of the people. The widow stepped forward onto the platform, her voice carrying above the battle. "People of Veyron, look at them. They fear the truth, they kill to hide their crimes. Will you still bow to them, or will you rise?" Her voice cut through the clash of steel. Workers paused, their anger sharpening. Even some of the guards faltered, doubt flickering in their eyes. Daniel fought with all his strength. His arms burned, his breath tore in his chest. But he would not fall. Every strike, every block was for the widow, for the truth, for Jarek, who had died for justice. A soldier lunged at the widow. Blade raised, Daniel saw it too late. But Kor moved like lightning, his pickaxe slamming into the soldier's chest. The man fell, and Kor stood protectively at the widow's side. Blood stained the hall, but the people's fury grew stronger. For every worker that fell, 3 more rose. The council's soldiers were outnumbered, their discipline breaking under the tide of rage. The council leader bellowed, his voice desperate. "You are fools, she is mad. This is nothing but a trick." The widow turned to him, her face pale but fierce. She raised one of the recordings in her hand and played it. The council's own voices filled the hall again, laughing over Jarek's death, mocking the people they controlled. The crowd erupted. The council's last defense shattered. Soldiers dropped their weapons, some fleeing, some surrendering. The people surged forward, surrounding the council. Daniel staggered to the widow's side. His blade dripped, his body ached, but his spirit burned. Kor leaned on his weapon, his chest heaving. Together they stood with her. The widow lifted her head high, her voice ringing clear. "They called me mad, they tried to starve me. They tried to bury me, but truth cannot die. And now the choice is yours. Will you kneel to them again? Or will you stand for justice?" The hall thundered with one voice. "Justice, justice!" The council members tried to flee, but the people seized them, dragging them to the platform. Fear twisted their faces as the miners and traders raised their fists. For the first time, the rulers were powerless. Daniel watched as the people demanded trial, demanded justice, demanded freedom. The widow stood tall, her chains gone, her voice no longer broken. She was no longer just a widow. She was the symbol of their strength. In the silence that followed the chaos, she turned to Daniel, her eyes shone with gratitude. "You believed when no one else did. Without you, I would have died in chains. My husband's voice would have been lost. You gave me back my strength." Daniel shook his head, his voice soft. "No, you had the strength all along. I only helped you show it." The people gathered around her, their chants filling the air. Torches blazed, lighting her scarred face. She lifted her hands. "This is not my victory alone, it is ours. It is for every worker who bled in the mines, every family who starved under their lies tonight. Veyron belongs to its people." Cheers shook the hall. The council was dragged away to face trial. Their reign was broken. Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle in his chest. He looked at the widow, once starved, once shackled, now standing unbroken before her people. Humanity was not measured by power or wealth or blood. It was measured by the courage to stand, to protect, to believe. And as the people of Veyron raised their voices in freedom, Daniel knew this truth would never be silenced again.